Odet de Coligny was a French aristocrat, cardinal, bishop-elect of Beauvais, peer of France, a member of the French Royal Council. From 1534 he was usually referred to as the Cardinal of Châtillon. He was son of Gaspard de Coligny and Louise de Montmorency, and brother of Pierre, Gaspard, and François, Seigneur d'Andelot. His birth at Châtillon-Coligny on the 10th of July 1517, his parents' second son, was recorded in his mother's Book of Hours. He and his brothers were homeschooled, under the direction of Nicolas Béraud of Orleans, a friend of Erasmus. Catholic career. He occupied high church offices during this initial part of his career. He became prior of St. Etienne in Beauvais in 1530. On the 10th of October 1531 he was nominated by the king to be abbot of St. Euvatius in Orleans, for which he obtained the necessary papal bulls on the 13th of April 1533. He resigned the benefice in 1537. Cardinal. At the papal consistory of the 7th of November 1533, he was created cardinal deacon, receiving the red hat and the titular church of Saint-Sergio-E Bacco 3 days later. Soon afterwards he became abbot of the Royal Abbey of Notre-Dame de Vaux-Lusland. In 1534 he became canon of La Sainte-Chapelle in Paris. On the 29th of April 1534 his nomination to the Metropolitan See of Toulouse by King Francis I was approved in consistory by Pope Clement VII. Despite his never having been ordained a priest, Cardinal Odet also required a dispensation for the archbishopric, since he was only 16, far below the minimum canonical age. The dispensation was granted by Pope Clement on the 28th of August 1534. On the 6th of September 1534, Odet de Coligny was ordained subdeacon, and on the 13th of September he was ordained deacon. Archbishop of Toulouse, Bishop of Beauvais, Châtillon held the post of administrator of the Diocese of Toulouse, never having been consecrated a bishop, until his resignation from that role on the 20th of October 1550. At the age of 17, he participated in the papal conclave of 11–12 October 1534, in which Cardinal Alessandro Farnese was elected Pope Paul III. Meanwhile, on the 20th of October 1535, his nomination to the See of Beauvais was approved in consistory by Pope Paul III. He held the administratorship of Beauvais until he was deprived of all his offices and benefices by Pope Pius IV in 1563. The spiritual functions of the Bishop of Beauvais were carried out from 1535 to 1538 by Philibert de Beaujeu, titular Bishop of Bethlehem. From 1538 to 1546 the bishop was Antoine Le Tonnelier, titular Bishop of Damascus. The Bishop of Hippo from 1546 to 1555. The Bishop of Hebron served from 1555 to 1556. The Bishop of Sebaste from 1556 to 1563, and from 1563 to 1569. Bishop Philippe Le Musnier. The cardinal was named abbot of St. Lucien de Beauvais by the king in 1537. He was still holding the benefice in 1553, though it is not known whether he continued to hold it until his deposition on the 31st of March 1563. Cardinal de Châtillon took part in the 9th session of the Ecumenical Council of Trent, which opened on the 13th of December 1545. King Francis I died on the 31st of March 1547, and it was reported a week later by Sir Edward Wotton, the English ambassador, that Cardinal Odet and his brother François were among the chief favourites of Henry II. As a peer of France, Cardinal de Châtillon attended the funeral of Francis I in St. Denis, and the coronation of Henry II at Reims on the 26th of July. King Francis I died on the 31st of March 1547, and it was reported a week later by Sir Edward Wotton, the English ambassador, that Cardinal Odet and his brother François were among the chief favourites of Henry II. Henry II, Cardinal de Châtillon, participated in the papal conclave of 29 November 1549 to 7 February 1550. He arrived late, however, on 12 December, along with Cardinals de Guise, du Bellay, Vendôme, and Tournon. A letter that he wrote to the Constable de Montmorency on 31 January 1550, during the conclave, provides an intimate view of the politics of the conclave, and provides an account of the sudden death of one of the leading candidates, Cardinal Niccolo Ridolfi, a nephew of Pope Leo X. Ridolfi had been greatly favoured by King Henry II of France. He opted for the deaconry of S. Adriano on 25 February 1549. Cardinal de Châtillon obtained from Pope Julius III the necessary bulls for his confirmation as Abbot of Fontenay-Jean, in the Diocese of Sens. Shortly after the new pope's election, the monastery was burned and the monks slaughtered in 1562. The Cardinal de Châtillon, who had apostatized in favor of Calvinism, was deprived of all of his benefices by Pope Pius IV on 31 March 1563. The cardinal did not stay long in Italy after the papal coronation. He was back in France by the 4th of March, when he was at Orléans. On the 11th of March 1550, he wrote a letter from Châtillon, and on the 29th of May he was following the court again and was in Boulogne, which King Henry had entered in triumph on the 15th of May after the city's capture from the English. On the 20th of October 1550, Cardinal Odet de Châtillon was appointed Abbot Commendatory of St. Jean de Sens. He also became the 77th Abbot, the 5th Abbot Commendatory of the Royal Abbey of Fleury, also known as the Abbey of Saint Benoît-sur-Loire. He held this benefice until he was deposed in 1563, though the abbey was sacked by the Huguenot army of the Prince de Condé in 1562. Protector of Rancid and Rabelais. As a member of the King's Council, Châtillon was placed in charge of the library of France's Royal Privy Council and, using this and his other offices, he protected his friends Rancid and Rabelais. In this he was working with Cardinal Jean du Bellay, who had been Rabelais' original protector. In 1552, after the cardinal had obtained for the latter a 10-year monopoly on book printing, Rabelais dedicated his Court Livre of Pantagruel to Odet in gratitude. The dedicatory epistle is dated 28 January 1552. In 1553, he succeeded Cardinal Claude de Longueuil de Givry as Abbot Commendatory of St. Benin de Dijon, and held the benefice until he was deposed in 1563. In 1554 the Cardinal de Châtillon published the synodial constitutions of the Diocese of Beauvais, containing some 21 chapters on the duties and conduct of the clergy, including the requirement that they keep the beards shaved and the hair cut short. The cardinal, according to his portraits, wore a full beard, which was becoming the fashion, and had very well-trimmed hair. The statutes, in fact, were a reworking of those promulgated 25 years earlier. In 1556 he became Abbot Commendatory of the Abbey of Ferrières on the appointment of King Henry II, with the confirmation of Pope Pius IV. 4 years later, Pius named him Grand Inquisitor of France, though the French Parliament's opposition to the Inquisition prevented him from taking up the post. Sometime after 1560, Cardinal Odet also became Abbot of Grandchamps of the Cistercian Abbey of Notre-Dame de Quincy in the Diocese of Langes, and of Vézelay. Finally, then, he was from 1554 to 1559 Prior of St. Pierre de Macon. Colloquy of Poissy. Cardinal de Châtillon participated in the famous Colloquy of Poissy in the summer of 1561. When the reformer Théodore de Bèze arrived in Poissy on the 23rd of August, he was met with great ceremony and obvious pleasure by the King of Navarre, the Prince de Condé and the Cardinal de Châtillon, almost with more honor than the Pope of Rome would have received had he come. Protestant career. On the 22nd of May 1558, Giovanni Michiel, the Venetian ambassador to the French court, which was at Monceau at the time, wrote that François d'Andelot, general of the infantry and Cardinal de Châtillon's brother, had been arrested at court on a charge of having participated in a meeting and procession of Protestants in the meadows beyond the Faubourg Street Germain, which was repeated day after day during the week. The Cardinal of Sens, Jean Bertrand, had been sent to investigate, and had ordered some 100 persons in Paris arrested. When questioned, François d'Andelot did not deny his affiliation with the Protestants, and he was sent under guard to Meaux, where he was confined. His wife was allowed to join him, but the king, who was very angry, also sent along several of his gentlemen to talk to him, as well as several professors from the Sorbonne, but he remained obstinate in his admitted affiliation. His brother, Cardinal de Châtillon, was also under suspicion of holding the same opinions, and should they choose to go investigating matters farther, wrote the ambassador, I understand that many others of much higher grade will be discovered. In fact, under his family's influence, the cardinal eventually went over to the Protestant camp himself, becoming a Calvinist Huguenot in April 1561. He was not the only French prelate to convert to Calvinism in this period. One other example is Jean de Montluc, Bishop of Valence. On Easter Monday, the cardinal celebrated the Eucharist in the episcopal palace at Beauvais. This was doubly offensive, first of all because he had never been ordained a priest and had no right to celebrate the Mass, and secondly because he celebrated the Eucharist in a rite similar to the Calvinist ritual used in Geneva. The result in Beauvais was rioting, which embarrassed and alarmed the cardinal, who sent for the governor of the Isle de France, François de Montmorency, to put down the disorders, but the mayor of Beauvais had already taken care to inform Montmorency what was going on, and Montmorency countermanded the cardinal's demand. He came to Beauvais alone, and discovered that the peace had already been restored. The people threw themselves on the mercy of the king, and the Queen Mother granted the supplication. Catherine de' Medici was eager to retain the services of the Cardinal de Châtillon as a bridge between Catholics and Protestants, hoping to use him to keep the peace between the two and thus preserve the monarchy for her children. On several occasions, even after his apostasy, she wrote him friendly letters requesting his help. At the same time, Philippe de Lenoncourt, the Bishop of Auxerre and brother of Cardinal de Lenoncourt, was writing to the Pope, urging him to strip Cardinal de Châtillon of his red hat. On the 21st of May 1562, however, the cardinal was cited to appear before the Roman Inquisition, and, having failed to appear, the sentence against him was published in Beauvais on the 29th of September 1562. When the Constable de Montmorency himself wrote to the Pope in favor of the cardinal, a second summons was issued on the 17th of November, which was published in Beauvais on the 10th of January 1563. The Royal Council then attempted to intervene, on the grounds that the summons was a violation of the royal prerogative. But the apostasy of a cardinal could not be overlooked by the papacy. This intervention failed and brought about the Cardinal de Châtillon's excommunication and deposition on the 31st of March 1563. The sentence was not carried out in France, however, where it was claimed that the law required that a bishop be judged by his fellow bishops. Gathering a faction around himself, he greatly helped those of the Huguenot party. He participated with his brother in the religious wars and acted as a mediator between the Protestants and Queen Catherine de' Medici. In 1562, he escaped the Inquisition to Lyon, relinquished his title of cardinal and called himself the Count of Beauvais, after his old bishopric. In the secret consistory of the 31st of March 1563, Pope Pius IV and the French Parliament excommunicated him as a heretic and deprived him of all his offices. Marriage. In December 1564, probably on the 1st of December, the cardinal married his mistress Isabelle de Hauteville at Montmorency, in a ceremony conducted by a Huguenot minister, Pierre. The cardinal appeared with his wife, wearing his cardinal's robes, at the coming-of-age ceremony of King Charles IX. He fought at the Battle of St. Denis and in 1568 fled to England. On the 5th of September 1568, the cardinal wrote a letter to King Charles IX from the village of Saint-Arpent, informing him that he had discovered a plan of his enemies to seize him in his house, and therefore he was fleeing from his house and from the kingdom. On the 8th of September he wrote to Queen Elizabeth, seeking asylum in England. On the 14th of September the cardinal wrote to King Charles again, and also to Catherine de' Medici, this time from London, begging the king to continue to hold him in his favour, and stating that he was not in England for any purpose, and that he had only decided to go to England some 3 hours before he left his house. In London, he requested monetary support for the French Protestants from Queen Elizabeth, who favoured him and his wife. He took up residence at Sheen, from which he frequently wrote letters to Sir William Cecil, the Secretary of State, on behalf of Protestants, whether soldiers, merchants or refugees from the civil war which was going on in France. In November 1568, Châtillon obtained permission to return to France, intending to sail to Rochelle, which was in Protestant hands and where he was expected, but bad winds at Portsmouth prevented his crossing. On the 10th of January 1569, Cardinal de Châtillon was commissioned by the Queen of Navarre, the Princes of Navarre, the Prince of Condé, and the other Protestant leaders, to seek aid from the Queen of England in the Third War of Religion. In February 1569, the cardinal was in Canterbury. In 1568, his former abbacy of Ferrières was besieged by the troops of Louise de Condé, friend of the Coligny family and fellow Protestant. The abbey was pillaged and profaned, and, although no monks were killed, the reliquaries and treasures of the abbey were dispersed. The tombs of Louis III, Carloman and Louis de Blanchefort heavily damaged and the monks' stalls removed. Cardinal Odet, though abroad by then, intervened to stop this. On 19 and the 23rd of May 1569, the Parliament of Paris deprived the Cardinal de Châtillon of all of his honours, offices, and estates, his dignity as peer of the realm, and the income of all of his benefices. The cardinal's brother François also died on the 27th of May 1569. Death. On the 9th of October 1570, having taken leave of Queen Elizabeth and his other friends at court, Châtillon set off for Southampton, intending to cross to France. He was preparing to go from England to La Rochelle to join his brother. Bad weather, however, prevented him from embarking, and in the meantime, on the 29th of October, he was granted the freedom of Southampton by the burgesses. On November 10th he was still prevented from crossing, a fire having broken out in the ship he was to use, and he decided therefore to change his plans and to go to Picardy instead of La Rochelle, though at that point he was impeded by the very bad health of his wife. He returned to London, where he joined the French ambassador de la Motte Fénelon in discussions on the subject of the proposed marriage of the 19-year-old Francis, Duke of Anjou and Alençon, to the 37-year-old Elizabeth. On the 6th of December the Cardinal left London for Canterbury, though in mid-January 1571 he was back at the English court and discussions on the Anjou marriage continued. On the 25th of January he left London again, and not in good health. He grew worse, and at the end of February he was suffering from fits. On the 2nd of March, Henry Killigrew wrote to his employer Cecil that he had just tried to see the Cardinal, who at first could not receive him, but later in the day he was sent for and found the Cardinal weak and faint. On the 13th of March Lord Cobham in London wrote to Dover Castle that the Cardinal was attempting to arrange a stay in an execution there, until he could plead at court, which the Cardinal said would be very soon. But on the evening of the 21st of March 1571, the Cardinal lost the ability to speak, and shortly thereafter died. He died at the former Pilgrims' Lodge at Canterbury under mysterious circumstances. Queen Elizabeth ordered a commission of inquiry into the cause of his death. The Cardinal's wife gave testimony that she believed that he had been given slow poison, and that the proof was in his perforated stomach, discovered at the autopsy. This, however, was most definitely not the opinion of the Cardinal's physicians. The doctors pointed out that, when the body was opened, the lungs and liver were also damaged. The stomach, however, was raw, but the commission could find no evidence of a poisoner, and would not have considered poisoning, had it not been for the insistence of Lady Châtillon. The Cardinal was therefore buried in a temporary and very plain tomb covered in Hessian and plaster in the Trinity Chapel in the East End of Canterbury Cathedral. It was meant to have been a temporary solution pending his body's return to France, but the transfer never occurred, and he still rests there. One conspiracy theory relates that since Coligny not being high-ranking enough for permanent burial in this important part of the cathedral, the tomb in fact contains the hidden relics of Thomas Becket from his nearby shrine. Coligny's body, having been returned to France, never in fact laid to rest here. This theory is not, however, accepted by historians. Family tree, bibliography. Atkinson, Ernest G., The Cardinal of Châtillon in England, 1568–1571. A paper read on 13 November 1889, before the Huguenot Society of London. Proceedings of the Huguenot Society of London. Volume 3. London, Huguenot Society of London, 1892. pp. 172–285. Becquerel, Antoine C. Acute Essai Souvenirs historiques sur l'Amiral Coligny. Sa famille et sa Seigneur de Châtillon-sur-Loing, Paris. Firmin Didot. Burton, Charles. Dictionnaire des Cardinaux, contenant des notions générales sur le cardinal, la nomenclature complète. Des Cardinaux de tous les temps et de tous les pays. Les détails biographiques essentiels sur tous les cardinaux. De longues études sur les cardinaux célèbres. Paris. J. P. Mignon. Facsimile edition. Farnborough. Cardella. Lorenzo. Gregg. ed. Memorie historique de Cardinali della Santa Romana Chiesa, IV, Rome, Stamperia Pagliarini, pp. 134–35, cols 692–93. Crystal, Marguerite. Odet de Coligny, Cardinal de Châtillon. Bulletin de la Société de l'Histoire du Protestantisme Français. 107–1–12 JSDOR. Chacon, Alfonso, Vitae et Res Gestae Pontific VM Romanorum ASRE Cardinalivum ab initio Sanctus Ecclesiae VSQU ad VRBANVM 8. Pond. Max. 2. Roma, Typus Vaticanus, Cols. 1480–81, 2 volumes. Coligny, Odet de Cardinal de Châtillon, 1515–71, Marlaire M. LCCN, ed. Correspondance de Coligny, Cardinal de Châtillon, Paris, a Picard. Crosby, Alan James, ed. Calendar of State Papers, Foreign Series, of the Reign of Elizabeth. Volume 8, London, Longman, Green, Longman, Roberts, and Amp Green. Crosby, Alan James, ed. Calendar of State Papers, Foreign Series, of the Reign of Elizabeth, preserved in the Public Record Office, London. H.M. Stationery Office. Delaborde, Jules. Gaspard de Coligny, Amiral de France. Tome Premier, Paris. Sandoz A. Fish-Barker, G. Fish-Barker, successor. D. Lettres, André. Histoire du diocèse de Beauvais, Beauvais, Desjardins, pp. 196–255. Ubel Conradus, Gulick Guillemus van Hierarchia Catholica Mediae Recentris AVI, Munster, Sumptibus Atypus Librariae Regensburg Winnie. Marlaire LCCN, Le Cardinal de Châtillon, 1517–1571, Paris, H. Menu, Annales de la Société historique et archéologique du Gâtinais. Volume 1, Fontainebleau, 1883. pp. 153–168, 193–213. Machon, Cédric, Cardinals at the Court of Francis I. Martin Heel, ed. The Prelate in England and Europe, 1300–1560. Woodbridge, Suffolk, UK. Boydell and Amp, Brewer Limited. pp. 76–98. ISBN 9781903153581. Saint Martyr, Denis de, ed. Gallia Christiana in Provincias Ecclesiasticas Distributor. Opera e Studio Domini Donici Samardani. Thomas Nonus, Paris. Typographia Regia. Saint Martyr, Denis de, ed. Gallia Christiana in Provincias Ecclesiasticas Distributor. Qua Series A Historia Archiepiscoporum, Episcoporum, Abatum Francia Eva Sinarum Caditionem. Thomas Quartus, Paris. Ex Typographia Regia.